Hey guys, Sam Maniscalco here, joined by Bill Cole. Champaign Room Hoops Podcast, Season 2, Episode 2, all things Illini Hoops on the way. Stay tuned. What's up, everybody? We are back for another edition of Champaign Room Hoops Podcast as part of the Beyond the Big Ten Podcast Network. You can check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you get your podcasts, and also on YouTube at Beyond Big Ten. Also, make sure to follow along on all social media, Twitter, IG, and TikTok with the handle Beyond Big Ten. I am former Illini point guard Sam Maniscalco. Again, joined by Illini legend, Mr. Glue Guy himself, Billy Cole at BuckWildBill33. Thanks for tuning in once again. Billy, what is good?
Not much, not much. Just got the flight back from Florida today, so back to the Illinois weather. Caught up on a nice Rutgers game last night. I think we've got an exciting team to talk about this week.
You didn't bring any of that Florida weather back with you?
No, I think that weather's gone for the year here in Illinois.
Yeah, golf season's over.
That's right.
All right. So last time we talked, we were just a few games into the season. We were really excited about this Illini roster and what they could potentially be. We talked about the mold of this new team and the pieces fitting together, and you know, Brad Underwood kind of putting that puzzle together and see what we got. So we are now 7 games into the season, 6-1, which is kind of about where I think we should be. Could be 7-0. But probably where we thought the Illini would stand 7 games in. The two things I want to highlight and talk about, or 2 games I should say, are obviously the early season matchup against Marquette at home, top 5 team coming into Illini land, and then we'll glance over this Rutgers game that Illini captured last night. So first, early impressions in the season, more specifically to that Marquette game a few weeks back.
Yeah, it was a good game. I thought we should have won it. I think it's just one of those games, and Illini Nation's maybe a little bit too familiar with this, where we have a big time player come in to State Farm Center and just take over. And I thought that was, really when I look back at that game and I try and come up with one or two talking points, I think both of them end up being Tyler Kolek, the point guard for Marquette. He just kind of gave it the not tonight. Like we're not losing this game. And like I said, one of the better point guard performances I've really seen in the last few years in college basketball. And then we've got the hindsight now to know exactly how good. It really stung a lot of time to lose the game, but then you got to watch Marquette out in Maui, and you could see how good Marquette is. So a game I think it shows us we probably beat them a couple, 5, 6 times out of 10. I think that's a toss up game if we play it 10 times. So there's a lot of good to take from that. I think it shows the schedule that most Big Ten teams are playing it's hellacious schedule. It's not going to get any easier, and we go straight from that to a couple warm up games, but then welcome to Big Ten season. You got to go all the way to New Jersey and play in a really hostile environment and get a win in Rutgers. So, yeah, what'd you think about Marquette game?
I thought it was a good early season test for us. I thought it was a chance for us to learn a lot. And I thought honestly, for 32 to 35 minutes of the game, I thought we played a good game. Like you said, Tyler Kolek went off. He kind of controlled the whole game from start to finish, which we've talked about, the Illini kind of having a lead guard that can do that. He certainly did that. But I thought for 32 or 35 minutes, I thought it was a great game. I thought we played well. But I thought what was very noticeable was the last 5 to 7 minutes of the game. Marquette really, really executed at a high level, both offensively and defensively. It was very evident they're a top 5 team. I mean, they got the shots they wanted. Like you said, Tyler Kolek kind of completely controlled the game, controlled the tempo, and especially their last 8 to 10 possessions. They did what they wanted offensively and got the shots that they wanted, and made the right plays to go win a road game. And on the other side of that, I thought they put us in some tough spots offensively. I thought we didn't take, some of the best shots down the stretch, and our overall execution wasn't that great. And I thought that was the difference in the game. But that's what you expect, right? That's a top 5 team. I know there's a lot of Illini fans after that game and I think you might have said it yourself too. Like that's a game we should have won. I completely agree that we could have won that game, but it's not a bad loss. Like there was some I saw some stuff on Twitter like that's a really bad loss. You can't lose to Marquette at home. Well, I don't think it's a bad loss. I mean, they're a legitimate top five team. It's early on in the season. We're still figuring our roster out. I thought it was a good early season test. Um, sh- sure. Do you want to win that game? Absolutely. Did we have chances to win that game? Totally. Like you said, I think if they played 10 times, it might be split down the middle. But it's certainly not a bad loss by the Illini. And I think, one big thing out of that game is Marcus Damask got his feet wet. He had 18 points in a high profile nationally televised game. Um, really his kind of coming out party. And I think he showed what he can be um, to this Illini squad moving forward. Terrence Shannon was great that entire game. But it was a good early season test, and I thought we played well. Obviously, not well enough to win, but maybe some things that they could shore up at the end of the game. To later on in the season win those type of games in the last 5 to 7 minutes.
Right, and you tend to get forgiven by the selection committee when March hits and it's time to decide seeding, and they look at you playing Marquette, and if that's like you said, definitely not a bad loss. If they look at that all the way back, first couple games of the year, I don't think that's the type of loss that's going to be held over anyone's head when you're deciding between maybe like a 2 or 3 seed, if you will. So I think you actually tend to get rewarded for that. I think about all like the Michigan State teams that typically have a lot of early season losses, and it seems like it's almost by design. That tough schedule ends up paying dividends later on in the year.
And like you said, they went on to beat Kansas. So they're legitimate. So
Right,
that's going to look good too.
right.
Um, Fast forward a little bit. Last night, like you said, first Big Ten opponent on the road at New Jersey. Not an easy game to play. I thought the Illini were great. I thought they came out with the right energy from the start. They put Rutgers on their heels from the start of the game. Ball was moving, ball was popping, energy was high defensively. Um, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about how the game progressed. But I thought there was a lot of good things from Illini last night.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think mentality giants in that first half, right? You get up by 20, you're playing as good as you can get. Then all of a sudden, they kind of have a little lull towards the end of the second half, and it gets back down to three, and you could kind of just see any other team that's not as old and doesn't start as many seniors as we do kind of look up at the scoreboard and pucker up a little bit, and that just didn't happen. They came out, put their foot on the gas second half, and closed out a huge win. Like I said, I think I saw a stat on Twitter the other day that Rutgers has in the 2020s to now has just has a better winning percentage in the Big Ten than Michigan State. So that's quietly evolved into a really, really nice program out
Yeah.
there. And I never got the opportunity to play there, but everything I hear is just how tough of a place that is to play. To go in there and kick your Big Ten season off, every win is going to matter. Come a couple of months, if we really are the team that we think we are, to be able to go on the road and put a W up is pretty special.
Yeah, I agree, and I think you made a good point. Get off to a hot start, and then you hit a little bit of adversity, right? And now here's the thing: you're on the road in the Big Ten. You got to be able to weather storms, right? That the home team's going to make multiple runs throughout a game, and Rutgers makes that run at the end of the first half and gets it to a one possession game. And I thought we did a really, really good job at the start of the second half, specifically Marcus Damask. I thought he dominated that first 12 minutes of the second half. Um, got in the paint, got to his spots, hit a three, got a post move, really made some nice plays around the basket too, and got us timely buckets when we needed them to kind of just keep Rutgers just enough far enough away, excuse me, um, for a little bit of a cushion on the road that you need, and that just speaks to, like you said, that's a guy that's been there before, right? Um,
Yeah.
a moment like that on the road in the second half, Big Ten, the home team's going to make a run. He's poised. He's been there before. No moment scares him. And then I thought everything else just fell in place. Terrence Shannon gets hot. Then the ball was popping, the ball was moving. One thing I noticed about this team 2 points. The two things I saw in that Rutgers game that I didn't see much last year is one. I think this year we've done a really good job of making the extra pass. So I
Yes.
think there's moments, and there were moments in that second half of the Rutgers game. Now, don't get me wrong. When you're feeling good and things are going well, it's easy to make that extra pass. But I think there's been moments throughout the season where guys are passing up a good shot for a great shot, and I think that matters throughout the course of a season. And the second thing is, um, early on or midway through the first half, Terrence Shannon had a kind of a broken fast break where he gets downhill, and man, when he gets downhill to his left hand, I mean,
It's
he's like the
crazy.
college version of Braun in the league once he gets his
Yeah, for
shoulder by
sure.
you. But he gets downhill on a kind of a broken fast break to his left hand and jumps in the air and probably has a layup, but it would be probably a low percentage shot. But that's a shot, a situation last year where I think he tried to force that ball to the rim. Instead, he finds Marcus Damask on a baseline
Yeah.
drift and makes a great pass to him in the corner for a wide open spot up three. That's just we've talked a lot about him and his maturation process of being a leader and being the engine that fuels his team. That's a play I'm not so sure he would have made last season and a pass he would have made.
100%. I actually thought the second that that play happened, when I was watching it, I was like, "Oh, Sam's gonna love that," because it's exactly what we've talked about on this podcast for literally the last 2 years. Is that they were dominating Rutgers that first 10 minutes, and he really didn't take over until the middle to late part of the second half. He did everything we've called it out from the start. He's got to let stuff come to him. He's good enough to take over when he's in the zone. He
Right.
doesn't have to go get in the zone from the tip. And meaning like he's not going to be able to win every game by himself.
He doesn't have to
So
force
what
the
he did
issue.
yeah, and what he did with getting everyone else involved, all of a sudden you've got role players, you've got Guerrier, you've got Damask, you've got Luke Goody hitting threes. Now all of a sudden everything's a one-man game or a two-man game with the floor spread, and Rutgers doesn't know what to do. They don't know who to guard. They can't help off anybody, and it just becomes a nightmare. And so yeah, I totally agree with you. He plays like that with that type of decision making. We've got a really scary team, and I don't want to get over our skis. But the second thing I noticed, and I had to look it up after the game, but we're the number one rebounding team in the country right now, team stat wise. So I think little things are overlooked, right? We talked about age. I think that's an age thing. That's a toughness thing.
Mm-hmm.
Gary A being brought in. I think
He's
his
24
rebounds
years
per 40.
old or 23 or 24
Yeah,
years old.
yeah,
He's a
yeah.
grown man.
Damask I'm in love with Mast's game, to be honest. Like since the very first game I watched him in the Kansas exhibition game, it was like, whoa, this is something different. I'm almost like I'm already sad that this is his last year with
Mm-hmm.
Illinois because it's like you just want to you see him for the first time, and you're like, you've only got a few more months with him, but I was just really excited. I think, all really, really positive stuff. It'd be tough to nitpick. If I had to, I would probably do like the where Bill was right in the first podcast. I think the only thing that gave us issues was the fact that we don't have a point guard, and
Mm-hmm.
they pressed us basically the whole game. And it seemed like every easy basket we gave them, um, was kind of started from Ty Rogers just not looking super comfortable against the press. And I don't blame him. I mean, you laughed at me last year when I said there's a few games like when we used to have to prepare for Missouri and Dayton, where as someone who never grew up playing point guard, you're all of a sudden forced into bringing the ball up the court because it's looked at as being a little easier. And
It's
he's a
not an
better
easy
ball handler
task.
than me.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but where I'm going with this, it's not something you can learn in your first Big Ten game or
No.
whatever we are 6 games into the season. He will be uncomfortable with that for a long time. And Moretti got in one of those. I think it was the Southern game, and he was super impressive in like the 15 minutes he had, but he tore his ankle up. So there's a lot of little storylines and threads coming out of that one specific issue. It'll be interesting to see if he comes back and Brad has the confidence to inject him into a role in one of these big time games we've got coming up. But yeah, just to wrap it up, all around really good stuff at Rutgers. Anything I missed in your when you reviewed the film there?
No, I thought you made a good point about the rebounding. First, like you said, Terrence Shannon Jr. has done a wonderful job this year of not trying to force the issue. And to your point, he's really doing a good job of picking and choosing his spots, right? When to be aggressive, when to be ultra aggressive, and when to just let the game flow. And it's very evident. He seems more comfortable in his own skin out there too. Um,
Right.
but what you said about rebounding, I think that I mean, I looked at the starting lineup when we were playing Rutgers, and I went on the line. I'm like, we're big, we're physical, like we're big
Yeah,
bodies, right? And I think physicality is a big strength of ours, and which ties in part to, like you said, the toughness and rebounding, right? Um, it's not easy to out physical teams in the Big Ten because it's a physical league, but we have the opportunity and the type of team that could out physical Big Ten teams. Um,
right.
which means when you go and play against teams, which we've talked about this too, when you get in the tournament, right? It's like a wrestling match in the Big Ten. You get in the tournament and you get this West Coast team with the wrong referee squad. You can't touch anybody. You have to almost relearn how to play basketball again with your hands tied behind your back. But
Right.
the physicality um, could be a positive of ours, and Ty Rodgers is a big part of that. I think he's sneaky. Um, like he's the kind of guy. I think him and Coleman Hawkins both are the two types of guys on this team that aren't going to wow you with numbers. Like Coleman Hawkins will have his big games. He had a couple, a triple double or two last year. He'll have his games where he fills up the stat sheet. Same with Ty Rodgers, but I think those are two guys that their impact on the game will be felt in other areas that might not show up on the stat sheet, right? Ty Rodgers is defensively being physical, crashing the offensive glass. He's a big body, gets a couple breakout steals. And then Coleman Hawkins, the way he can pass, the way he, kind of mans the paint, the way he changes and goes after his aggressiveness, going after shots and changing shots. And then he could be a really good ball mover too, Coleman Hawkins, side top side type guy. Um, he also hasn't forced the issue as much as I saw last year. I felt like he pressed a little bit last year. So, um, but I agree. I think they're in a good spot. I think the good thing is that we're talking about all these positives and not so much negatives. And here's the thing: these are all things that they can build on and get better with. Right? It's not like we've hit our ceiling. It's not like um, we've hit our peak and it's like, well, I don't know how much better we can get or how much better this guy could play or that guy could play. I'd say Terrence Shannon Jr. probably is what he is at this point. He's averaging 20 a game. His splits are awesome. 20 a game. Uh, I think he's shooting 50 something percent from two. Here, let's see. 20 a game, 51% from the field, and 46% from three, and 72 from the line. Those are awesome splits in the Big Ten.
So
Right. And
all
we
Big
talked
Ten
about him.
numbers.
Right. We talked about him being better from behind the 3-point arc. And I think the reason for that increase in him shooting 46% is because he's taking different shots, right? He's not taking those 2 to 3 a game where he forces off of no pass, 3, 4 dribbles, trying to create something out of nothing that he throws up there that don't have a chance of going in. Damask is a guy right now, in my opinion, and I'll turn this over to you in a second. I love what you said about him. He's averaging 9 a game right now. His splits and his numbers aren't that great. I think that's only going to go up. I think as he gets more comfortable and gets more opportunities, I think he's going to become our legitimate second option, sometimes first option on given nights. I think he's that experienced. I think he's that skilled. I think he shoots from 23 feet. He can also go against a smaller defender and play with his back to the basket on the block. He can get to the free throw line. He's physical, and he also can clean some stuff up around the rim because of his size. So I think his numbers go up, and I wouldn't be surprised by the end of the season if he's an all Big Ten player as well.
Yeah. No, I agree with all those points. I think I do want to touch up one thing that I just thought about, which is when it comes to Ty Rodgers, I don't want to seem like I'm being negative. He's one of my favorite players on the team, but I just think he's being forced to play out of position. But what you said is huge, right? Because every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and the opposite side of that is his defense, on a smaller point guard or a two guard, is stifling. Like
Yeah.
Rutgers struggled to get into anything, and I think that you know, I think that's probably what Underwood sees
Mhm.
is like, hey, like let them bring the ball up the floor. We're gonna get into our offense really quick. Our offense isn't really, it's not super tactician based. It's basically get into a 2-man set and hit the paint. Get 2 feet in the paint, and if you've got a layup, take it. If you don't, kick it out to the shooter. And if we need to get into a shot clock scenario, then get it to Shannon and get out of the way. And on the other hand, I think we play a lot like Purdue. We used to play in practice all the time. I thought this was really interesting when I was younger, and then I started to understand it when I played a bunch of games in the Big Ten. But every single possession, if you count how many times the Illinois ball handler had their feet in the paint, versus how many times did Rutgers get their feet in the paint with the ball. I don't know what it was. I should have marked it down. We dominated that stat last night. It is extremely our team defense. This might be one of the better, and it's tough to top a lot of his teams, but this might be one of the better defensive teams we've ever had.
Hmm.
And when you can, we've already touched on rebounding, number one in the country, pretty tough to beat with the schedule that we've played. And then when you can put a defense on top of that rebound, you go into every single game that we're going to play knowing that if you just have a marginal night on offense, you're going to be
Chance
in
to
the
win.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when you do what you did in the first half at Rutgers, where you shoot it really well, and everyone is playing cohesively, and people look like, Terrence Shannon looks like, oh, this isn't my first year in the system anymore. I understand what Underwood wants out of me. There's almost, even though he was older last year, there's almost a little freshman mentality there where he's playing for a completely new coach, new system. He thinks he needs to take over. All of a sudden, it looks like it's slowed down a little bit for him, and they're
Good
kind of
point.
in lockstep, and he knows exactly what the decision to be made is each time down the floor. And maybe a last point on that Rutgers game for me is it made me laugh because my immediate reaction was just like stay centered, right? You've heard me say that before when we're golfing together, when we're playing really well, and it was just like you're never as good as your last game in the Big Ten, and you're never as bad as your last game in the Big Ten. And I
Hmm.
think that's where Illini fans can start to get like their brains start turning to mush because they see that game at Rutgers and they're like, "Oh, we're going to win the national title this year." So I think the players need to stay grounded, try and repeat that performance as much as possible. They'll be in a great spot come March.
Yeah, they just seem so much more. I mean, so much more connected this year. Especially from a defensive perspective, like you said, and that's a great point about Ty Rodgers. We used to talk about it when we were playing too. One of the points, Bruce would make, or any coach you really play for would make, is get the other team to start their offense 30 feet from the basket. And you
Yes.
know what that's like as an offensive player when you're out there like this. 30 feet from the basket trying to get into your offense. It's not a comfortable feeling. Um,
Mm-mm.
and Ty Rodgers is a guy, like you said, that can do that. So good spot. Illini are in a good spot. Let's look ahead now. So 6-1 start. Pretty much what we expected. Like I talked about, Terrence Shannon Jr. leading the way. Got some great pieces of this team. Looks like they're molding the right way. Now comes a great test for the Illini. Tuesday this week, got a ranked Florida Atlantic team that went to the Final Four last year. I believe, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Coming into Champaign. Is it in Champaign?
it's a good question.
Says it's a home game. Oh no, it's in New
It's in
York.
Madison Square Garden.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
it's the
it's the
MSG game. We should have known that. This is where they beat Texas last year, right? Illini.
yes.
Yeah. So Florida Atlantic at Madison Square Garden. What a test early on in the season. 6-1. You lose a close one to a Marquette team, a top 5 team. You handle the rest of your business. Now you got Florida Atlantic on Tuesday, and then you go to Tennessee next Saturday. Another top. Tennessee is currently ranked 10th in the country. So you got 2 top 15 teams coming up. What do you want to see out of these 2 games from the Illini?
Yeah, man, this schedule kind of makes me recoil in a little bit of fear almost. Not fear, fear is not the right word, but it's just like you almost wish you didn't have these 2 games. Like you're on such a good feeling right now. You're going to have that Tennessee game more than I'm going to skip the Florida Atlantic one for now. That Tennessee game is going to be one of the most physical games that any college basketball player or any college basketball fan has watched all year. I guarantee you
Yeah.
that Rick Barnes has those guys like we think we're physical, we think we rebound. That's going to be strength on strength. So I'm interested to watch that. And then, like you said, right, Florida Atlantic was a buzzer beater away from the going to the national title game last year. Still a top 15 team in the country. Playing at Madison Square Garden, I got the opportunity to play there for Illinois. That's just a special thing. That's where big players come to play, and so I expect a lot out of Terrence Shannon. Maybe he doesn't have to have a 30 ball, but he needs to get the team and just if they just like I said, if he's just the metronome, right? Like if he's making everything flows through him, he dictates who shoots what, and then all of a sudden when it comes, he goes. We're going to be fine in that game, I think. But yeah, and just to put the cherry on top of those 2, you've always got that Missouri bragging rights border war. So doesn't matter what their record is going into that game. That's a passionate, hard-fought game every year, right around Christmas time. So the end of the non-conference slate here is a absolute
The gauntlet.
uh, it's going to be a war every game. So I'm excited to watch. And then we've got one kind of nothing burger Colgate game stuck in there, so that'll be a good game to get some of the younger guys their last. Those type of games are the last really chance for the guys that are on the fringe to get some trust from Underwood to get in the game and who's going to get 5, 10, 15 minutes. So this the whole rotation, I thought you saw it slim down a little bit at
Yep.
Rutgers. Part of that was injury, I think, and then foul trouble with Hansberry getting in there. But yeah, it'll be pretty much you will know what our team looks like over the next 4 games, right?
Yeah, totally. I think from a quantity perspective, I think a split would be awesome for the Illini. You win one of those two, I think you're in a good spot from a morale standpoint. It's not the end of the world if they lose both, but you got to try to, I mean, get one of those games. They get both, and then I think we might have to temper some expectations if Illini go and win both of these games. But like you said, I think Terrence Shannon Jr. is going to have to be the leader in those two games. But to your point, I think these are the two games where you really see, we just talked in loathed about Marcus Damask and right, and what
Hmm.
he could potentially be, how good he's been these first 7 games in the early onset of the season. What does he do in these two now? We're talking about two top 15, basically top 10 opponents away from home. You know what you're going to get from Terrence Shannon Jr. Who's going to be that second guy um, that makes plays, that does some, the Marcus Damasks, the Dane Danges, the Luke Goodies, the Coleman Hawkins. Who's these are the types of games where you see what these guys really, really bring in their respective roles, right? Um, I think Goody's been great this season. He's shooting 46% from three. I think he's got a quick release. Um, but does he have a game where he goes and makes 4 threes? Um, it's not gonna. It can't be Terrence Shannon Jr. willing us to two wins in these next two. There's too much on his shoulders. I hope he does it, but I think we're really going to find out and learn a lot over this next 7-day stretch than we have these past 7 games about Illini.
Yeah, I totally agree. The Coleman Hawkins thing, if I could tell all the Illini nation to keep an eye on something, it's almost like, and I know it doesn't matter, right? They just want to win games. But I think, like I've said, the maestro of all this has been Terrence Shannon to this point in the season. In the last couple of years, we've been looking like, okay, it's got to be a two-headed monster. Well, I'm here to tell you, I think it's a one-headed monster right now. I think Coleman Hawkins, he's kind of just doing what he does well, but he hasn't had that explosion game where we look at each other and we're like, he should be in the NBA next year. He
Mm-hmm.
hasn't had that yet. And so, is that going to happen in one of these big games or not? And do we even need it to happen? So that's kind of a hypothetical question. Is he better as the 10 and 5 and 4 guy? As do we win more games versus the 19 and 12 where he tries to
Mm-hmm.
do a little too much. So I don't know. I think we're an interesting team. I think we've basically got the three-headed scoring monster, which is Shannon, Damask, and Hawkins, and it can be any mixture of those three. And then we've got a really good set of older role players. One guy we haven't mentioned, he's like my favorite player to get a dig in each episode is Dane Danger. I think his like points per minute is out of. He actually is second on the team and he's second on the team in scoring this year. It feels like he's
I
never in the
saw
game.
that. Yeah, I know.
It's unbelievable. He's just not that. You hit the nail on the head last episode. He's just not the type of guy that you can play 40 minutes.
Right.
He's a bench big, which is awesome. He's such an enigma to me. I haven't seen anything like it. He scores punches and bunches from the post.
Yeah, he's definitely a spot minute matchup based big. Spark off
For
the
sure.
bench if they need it. But like you said, Tennessee big physical game. Don't be surprised if he has an impact on that game. But you got to have that, right? I thought
Sure.
to your point, last year we tried to ride him a lot as treated him like he was like Zach Edey or Kofi, and he's not that. He's a spot minute matchup based big. So 6-1 headed into these two. I think when we get back on here in a week or so, we'll have some good juice to talk about whether it's good or bad for Illini, because um, I think not only us in Illini fans, but I think Brad Underwood is probably looking forward to these two games, not just from a competition standpoint, but from a litmus test. Um, I think he's really going to learn a lot about his guys over this next slate here. So that's a wrap for Illini. I do want to shift gears just for a second and do a little around the league thing. Um, did you see Northwestern beat Purdue
I
again?
did. I
Number one
did.
in the country. So here's my thing,
I
right?
did.
Like, great win. Obviously awesome for the Big Ten. Fantastic for Northwestern. I'm a huge Chris Collins fan. So that's just awesome. I don't know though. I've never been a big Purdue guy, right? And I'm not taking anything away from Northwestern. That's awesome that they do that number one ranked team in the country at the time. But like what without, and listen, Purdue has Zach Edey, so I'm not going to say like, without Zach Edey, what are they? But I am going to say without Zach Edey, are they like a bottom of the Big Ten team? I know it's college basketball and he's that much of a force to make them what they are. I've just never been a big fan of Purdue style, or last year they were talked about all season long, and they flopped in the tournament. What are your thoughts on that whole? I mean, great win for Northwestern. Props to Northwestern. Awesome win.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? I think it was the quintessential trap game of all
Mhm.
trap games. They just won Maui, right? And then all of a
Totally.
sudden you're starting the Big Ten slate at Northwestern, which I mean, let's be real. The Big Ten is so deep every year. If you see Northwestern on the schedule, it's not like you're seeing
No.
some of the bigger like big time names, the classic blue bloods of the Big Ten. You're kind of like, all right, let's go get a W at Northwestern and take care of business. Um, Now, what you said is right. Chris Collins has changed that 100%. Now you're in for a dogfight every time you go up there. So I think there's a little bit of that. I don't think that this is one of those answers that's like, yes, Purdue's overrated. I do think Purdue will probably still win the Big Ten. I'll put that out
Hmm.
there. I just think what Matt Painter does and what he recruits, they will never be bottom of the Big Ten.
No.
He is 100% geared up to win the Big Ten. And if it's like we've we talked on it in past episodes, their struggles in the postseason. We talked about the Big Ten struggles in the postseason. They are a microcosm of that, right? They're so overly physical. It's like you talked about in the front end of this. They are the team that you're exhausted just trying to catch the ball on the wing. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, when that physicality runs out, or a team starts getting shots, or Zach Edey is in foul trouble, now all of a sudden things are different, and they can absolutely be beat. Do I think they're like going to win the Big Ten by 5 games? No, but I still think they win it. I think they will continue to be what they always are, which is just a rock solid team that no one wants to play, and they probably don't. They're probably not a Final Four team.
I heard a lot on the broadcast last night when Bardo was talking in the Illini game. There's a lot of talk of they've already anointed Purdue as the best team in the Big Ten, which deservedly so. Who's the like? We potentially could be the second best. I think there's a group of teams that could be the second best team in the Big Ten. I think we're in that conversation. Do you agree?
Totally, I think. I mean, I called second in our first episode. I'm gonna stick with my hot takes and say Purdue's one. We're two. I think Wisconsin's coming out of nowhere. I know they just got a win over Marquette, which we lost to. They've beat Marquette 3 times in a row, and this time Marquette was a top 5 team when they beat them.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of thought Greg Gard was on the program since Bo Ryan, since what we had to play against was a little down. And man, that's a huge win at home for
Yeah.
Wisconsin. So I don't know, is that the type of team that can compete over a full season in the Big Ten? I just haven't seen enough of them yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the whole question marks at Michigan State. They've lost a few games early, but we all know what they do in the Big Ten. So like, I wouldn't be, I think if I had to like layer 3 and 4, it'd probably be those two teams in there.
Yep. Well, should be an exciting season. So, um, we're going to wrap it up. Just want to give a shout out. I know Billy and I have been on these last two episodes solo, but just shout out to Brandon Paul. He's still hooping overseas. Schedules are hectic right now for everybody, so he hasn't been able to join. Um, the first two episodes of the season, but we promise Brandon will be on throughout the season. So, shout out BP3 again. Champaign Room Hoops podcast, season 2, episode 2. Thanks for joining, everybody. Billy, we'll see you next time, bro.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sam. See ya.